Tonight, Ben Sasserich is going to follow up our previous presentation on troubleshooting that Tom Van Stifhout and Kim Young presented. This is more the second part of that, where they talked about designing their applications to avoid problems. Ben's going to talk more about what do you do when things don't work the way you expect. What steps do you go through? What kinds of things do you have to think about to recover? But before we turn the time over to Ben, I want to hit a few highlights of news and updates. Reference to the Microsoft Access roadmap. Some people today, I started to see reports that some people on the beta update channel of 365 saw previews of the Monaco SQL editor today. So I don't know how widely that is released, what the pattern is, but if you're on an update channel, you might well see the new Monaco SQL editor in preview mode in the near future. Has anybody else here tonight seen it yet?
I've seen it. It looks great.
Good.
But I haven't seen it in my channel. I just saw the demo.
Okay. Yeah, Colin Riddington and I forget who the other person is, reported they had seen it. So I'm pretty excited about that. That should be a real plus. I also wanted to bring up the Discord server for Access developers. That has been in operation for a while. The two things that are most relevant to that, there are a series of Access talks, or Access chat. It's a coffee break. It's an hour long, and I saw today that there's one scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. my time. And there's another one that's been scheduled for Tuesday. I believe it's at the same time. So either Tuesday or Friday, you should be able to join. Typically,
the Tuesday meeting is earlier.
Is it earlier?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I should come back to that in a second. But I just saw that today when I was scrambling to get ready for this meeting. And you'll need this invitation to join. I'll put this into the chat so you can copy it. But in order to participate, you'll have to respond to this link if you haven't already joined. The other thing I wanted to point out tonight is the Access User Group SQL converter, which we have on the Access User Group website. And that's particularly relevant because Ben was one of the key developers involved in putting that together. And it's a terrific tool if you need to convert SQL from Access to, well, I guess it converts to VBA and to T-SQL. Do you have anything else to add about that, Ben? Just really
Yeah, it'll convert your Access, like the JET style of SQL, to Transact SQL, T-SQL. But it can also format it as VBA. It doesn't really convert it to VBA, but
it formats.
It's just a bonus.
So I think it's a very handy tool if you need to, if you're working in both Access and SQL Server. And of course, we have new and reactivated Access User Group channels. Edgar's Latino America, actually, they met a couple hours earlier today. Edgar Trent, moved his meeting day and time. So as I was getting back home and getting ready to start, I noticed that his meeting was held earlier today. It was on JSON again. So looking forward to seeing how that works with him. There's a new group in Italy starting up, I believe, in the fall, and a new group in Australia. Kent, where are you in your preparations?
Well, I was sort of aiming for about that same kind of time frame, September.
Okay. Did I get the name right? Is that what you're going to call it?
Yeah. Because I want to have a particular emphasis on Access with SQL Server Express. Because most of my business is small business, and Express does the job quite nicely. So I wanted to put a focus on that as well.
Okay, great. And the final note under that is I anticipate transitioning Pacific chapter to a new chapter president by the end of 2024. And I had a lot of reasons for doing that. Basically, I just feel like it's time to recruit someone younger, more up to date, more in tune with what's really going on. As I've said several times over the last few months, it's time to recruit and train our replacements in a lot of ways. And this is one place where I think that's important. So if you know somebody who wants to take on this role, it takes me anywhere from an hour or to 2 hours, 3 hours a month working with potential presenters. Usually that involves finding somebody that has something interesting, different, unique to share. And I spend anywhere from 8 to 20 hours editing the video of a presentation before it can be uploaded to YouTube. And those are the two big.
Is that taking out all the swear words, George?
Actually, it's taking out you know what I mean, the hesitations,
The ums
and the ums. That's the biggest part of it. But every once in a while, I will run across a stretch where we get off on a sidetrack and it's not relevant to the presentation. So I tend to shorten those. But it's mostly just making sure that it flows smoothly for video or for YouTube presentation. Back to our presentation. Ben, at a user group meeting in the recent, I forget which one it was, we ended up after the session talking about a problem that Ben had encountered. As a group, we went through the process of trying to figure out where the problem came from and what to do about it. And during that presentation, I was very impressed by the logical, methodical way the group went about it, but it was Ben's project and the way he attacked his problem. And I thought that would be a very good thing to share with other developers, that, you know, sort of a step-by-step approach, a logical approach, what things to look for, what things to rule out, what things to rule in your procedure. And so I asked him to do that, and I think it should be a very interesting presentation. So, Ben, are you ready?
So as George said, this precursor to this was just having a group session of tracking down a bug that I had. And so he's asked me to present. And so I'll just kick off a little bit here and just tell you a little bit about myself. I really like Access, but I like all the other things I can do in my daily tasks to make Access programming better, or VBA programming, SQL programming. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is Eastern time. I've been doing this since I got VB6 certified in 1998. I've been using VBA and Access and SQL Server since then, every day. I've traveled some for my job. So that's been a kind of a perk of working for a big company that does international jobs. So I'll just get down to business, and I'm going to try to balance my time here through these 4 sections. What I want to talk about first is troubleshooting with an end user. So when you first find out about a problem, it might be something you find on your own code, but let's say it's one of the things that your users brings to your attention. How do we handle that? How do we hear about those issues? They might come in as an email, it might be a phone call. You might see it posted online. Maybe somebody's asking a question that you're going to try to help them troubleshoot, or it may be somebody in the office or in person somewhere where you can work with them. One of the things I try to do is figure out what the problem is. So what's the best way to get the user to communicate the issue to me so that I can attempt to resolve the issue? So asking for a screenshot is a good start. Now, we all know sometimes they just give you a screenshot of the error message. You can't see what else was on the screen. So sometimes you need to ask for, hey, give me your full screenshot. I want to know what was on the screen when this happened. You can also sometimes ask for their backend so that you can actually look at the data. Maybe it's an application you've written and you have a trust with that client that they can send you their back end. We also want to know, when we're asking them for more information, well, what were they doing? And they can try to elaborate on it more. You got to get them to say, it doesn't do anything. When I click the button, nothing happens. Well, which button did they click, and what is nothing? Because maybe they're doing an export and they click the button and Excel is supposed to pop up and show data, but maybe Excel pops up but no data shows. So you have something. Now you know that at least the code is getting to the point to launch Excel. Whereas if they're clicking the button and they're saying the button's not even refreshing, when they click it doesn't even look like it's clicking. We've got an issue with Citrix where some of the users, the mouse doesn't line up with the buttons. The mouse will be like an inch to the right. And there's a little configuration I've learned, and I have it in a canned email that I send out every time a user presents that problem to me. They say, hey, I'm clicking and nothing happens. It's unresponsive. So another thing I try to assess from the user is the problem repeatable? So what specific things did they try? And you got to remember, when somebody says, I've tried everything, you must have missed something. Because when we're troubleshooting, that applies to us as well. We might say, hey, I tried it on this person's computer. I tried it on this version of Access. I tried it on last week's version. It's still happening. You got to narrow down and get an assessment of where the problem is happening and where the problem is not happening. So that's almost just as important to know where that division is. Does it work on Sally's computer but not Pete's computer? Does it work? Did it work yesterday and doesn't work today? Now, if I go back to yesterday's version, does it still fail? We have to build. I don't know how to put it into words, but you've got to ask a lot of questions. Kind of like, I wish I would have put this into words ahead of time. You're throwing darts at the beginning, and you're just trying to collect some points to figure out where the problem is and where the problem isn't. That's probably the biggest point I want to make when I talk about troubleshooting, is narrowing down to where the problem is. Because once we realize it's not in a certain area, that makes our focus smaller. We can really drill down when we know it's not a Microsoft problem and it's not a user problem. Now we maybe figured out it's bad data that's causing the problem. Anybody have any questions at this point?
Yeah, my favorite is when the users say, it is doing this. And I respond, what is it? I can't see what it is.
If I had a meme to pop up for that question, I would do the one where Cuba Gooding Jr. Is told by Tom Cruise, help me help you. Give me some more information so that I can help you. How can we address intermittent bugs where the user says, well, it does this to me, but they can't reproduce it? So how would you address that? Well, you want to try to find a pattern. Does it happen the first time every morning? Does it happen the first time they load the app? Does it happen only when more people are in the app than just one person? Does it happen only on someone's computer? There's just a lot of questions you can still ask to try to narrow this down. And sometimes when you get an issue thrown at you, you want to make your first guess right away. And that's okay, I think, to just make an educated guess of what the problem is without understanding the whole issue. But we've all run into really troublesome problems that aren't resolved in a few minutes. And we have to really gather more data, more information about the problem to try to figure out what it is and what it isn't. So back to the intermittent bugs, one of the things that we can do is we can add logging to our software. So you could make a little table in the database that tracks every time somebody opens a form, every time they click the button that's causing the problem. You could write to that table some status of variables, the computer name that's launching it, the username, that's been something I now incorporate into all the databases that I release, more and more of it, actually. More logging. Some of it writes out to a text file. There's a reason I do that. And on this topic here, the last bullet point I had, I didn't want to fill up the screen with bullets because I feel like people just read the screen when I'm doing that. Time travel is something we have at our disposal here. We can go back in time. So can we go back to a version where it worked? You notice a problem today. You don't know if today's the first day it happened or if it's been there all along. You need to assess that. You want to try to ask the user, hey, when did you start noticing this happening? And they might tell you, oh, it's been happening the last 6 months. And you know how that is. It's like, why didn't you tell me this sooner? They might only press this button once a month to do their monthly report. And they say last month it worked. Now it doesn't work. So one of the things we could try to do is we could try to rerun last month's report. That's a way of going back in time. If that report works, then that might identify the problem as being a data issue. Another thing we can try to do is try to find another computer where it works. It's not really time travel, but it's changing our scope a bit to see if it's happening for everyone or just one person. Any comments from you guys?
Just yeah, that all makes a good bit of sense. What you're basically saying, that you've got to find, in spite of the fact that you get very little information, certainly very little reliable information from the user, you want to find where the difference is between it working and not working, because that will help you identify where to look.
Right.
It's almost like trying to find a point on a timeline where state changed. Obviously, for example, if you have a Windows update or an Office update, that's a point in time where things change. But you're also looking for, you're trying to identify that point other than externally by looking at your own data.
That's what I was going to try to address with this slide here is you got the error today. Now you need to go back and say, hey, was it happening here? Was it happening here? Was it happening here? And you want to track that down so that you can say, hey, is it just in this range where we actually have it working or have it not working? And so that helps us put us in a position of now we're focusing only on this area, or we can exclude that area. I think of a binary search. If you guys know what a binary search is, or if you don't, you've got the alphabet and you need to find where Thomas is, where his record is. So you've got 26 letters. You divide it in half and you say, okay, A through M. Is Thomas in A through M? No, Thomas is not in A through M. So you go from M to Z and you see, hey, Thomas is there. Now we just eliminated half of the problem. Half the data is eliminated. Now we're trying to find Thomas, and we'll take that M through Z. We'll divide it in half, see which half Thomas is in. Mathematically, this is the fastest way to drill down to the problem. And that's the other thing we want to do while we're trying to assess this is how are we going to attack the problem so we're not spending days trying to resolve this or chasing our tail, I guess, chasing loose ends that aren't actually part of the problem. So I'll jump to my next slide. Okay, I wanted to throw this in there because George told me he hadn't heard of this. There's a term called rubber duck debugging. It's kind of something you might see in programming forums on the internet. And it's basically when you don't have someone else to talk to, if you talk to your inanimate object, you explain the problem to them. Sometimes that helps you think of things you haven't thought of. Just like when you call up your best programming buddy and you explain the problem and all he does is say, and then you figure out the problem. And he says, I didn't really help you, but he said, you really feel like they did help you. So that's a method we can use. Attacking the problem. One of my points I want to make here is to be organized. Think of what you have on hand to address the issue. What's the environment like? You want to, in some cases, you want to close Access, close Excel, and reopen it. So you know you're starting with a clean slate. You might want to go to Task Manager and make sure all of your Excel and Access instances are closed, or whatever you're trying to automate. I always have this problem with Excel, is where Access will open Excel to generate a report. And if you get an error, then that session of Excel is still in memory. And the next time you try to run it, you don't sure what you're going to get. So I'll go into Task Manager, I'll clear out Excel, clear out Access. Another thing we can do, and this all depends on what kind of problem you have, but you might want to open up Access holding the Shift key to make sure that some of the things that are trying to run aren't running. Maybe you're having some kind of connection problem, or maybe Access is acting like it's corrupt. It's a different kind of problem to have. That's no fun at all, but it's one of the things that gets thrown at you on occasion. Sometimes a cold boot can solve your problem, or the user's problem as well. You know, if the user says, "Hey, I haven't rebooted in a week," you know, you can maybe suggest that. Depends what the problem is. You don't want to sound crazy by suggesting that, because it's inconvenient for some people to reboot. One thing I like to do when I have a file that I think is corrupt, immediately make a backup of that file. And by making a backup, I make a zip backup, because when it's zipped, I know nothing can happen to it. Nothing like, because sometimes you can open a file and then close the file, and actually, because autosave was turned on, or because it's an Access database and things were running, then you didn't hold the Shift key. You know, you can make alterations to that unknowingly. So I like to make a zip backup of the front end and the back end when I identify a problem. Sometimes the problem that we're dealing with is just our own programming, no users involved. But and this is like the problem that I had a month ago when George and I and the group here tried to help me resolve it. I made a backup because I thought my front end was corrupt, because my code just wasn't running, or the code I was running actually was not sticking. I was trying to code some conditional formatting, and I would run it, and then I'd close the form and reopen the form, and I'd have a different result. So at that process, I was making backups. I was going to previous versions of my software, because I make lots of backups of my Access databases. And I'm calling this under the category of being organized. You need to have backups on hand, and you need to know that your backups are working. And you want your backups to be consistently named so that you can find them. An example that I'll try to show you here is, maybe I'm working on this Access database, got a problem with it. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to make a zip of it. But the zip file that is going to be made will have the date and time of, not now, but the date and time of the file. So I last opened that file a few days ago, 6/4, and you can see that 6/4 is in the name here. So now you can see I've got different times of that backup of that database that I can go back to now if I need to restore, try to look for a problem. Another way of being organized while we're trying to address the issue or attack the problem is to only make one change at a time. If you think there's some kind of Windows setting that's wrong and causing your connection, don't change 5 Windows settings and then reboot and see if that fixes the problem. Maybe early on, when you're pretty sure you know what the problem is, but when it's a serious problem and it's causing an outage for a lot of people, just be very meticulous and make one change at a time. Try to track what that change is. Maybe write it down, take a screenshot while you're working, because you might have to undo what you did, and what you did you might have to report to others. So you want to be able to tell, because we're not the end all debugger. If we can't figure it out, we're going to have to ask someone else, and we want to be able to spell out to them what we tried and what we didn't try. We can't say what we didn't try if we don't have a log of what we did try. Let's talk about, okay, assessing the issue. I'm a visual thinker, so I try to put things in one of these boxes, and we're really trying to get things out of this gray box. So does it happen on every person's computer in the office? Yes, it does. So we know that it's happening for everybody, so we don't have to jump around to different computers testing it. Does it only happen for someone who has the latest version of, or Windows 11, say? Okay, so maybe it's only happening to Windows 10 users, not Windows 11 users. Then that would put something in the other box. We want to know, is the problem with our data, with the coding, with Windows, with our file structure, or with a particular computer or even a user? So we need to put those into boxes. And the nice thing about putting it in the box is if we do it right, when Larry comes in and says, well, it's happening to him too, but differently, we can say, yeah, we know, Larry, it's happening to everybody. It's not just different for you. And what I'm trying to say is we don't want to be distracted. Once we realize something is always where the issue happens, we don't have to worry about looking somewhere else. It's just part of, I think, of being meticulous and being organized. So I'm going to move to the next chapter. I'm not even watching the time here. Okay, so it's 10 o'clock here. So we've got our pal Microsoft, and this is not somewhere that I tend to find bugs, because I work in a corporate environment and we're on a 6-month rollout of Access and Office. So usually the bugs are resolved by the time we get the software. But recently I got my plan changed just for me so that I can start working with some Copilot issues. So hopefully I'll see Monaco editor here soon, but now I might have to be in the club of the guys who have to deal with Microsoft issues. I was going to defer to George or anyone else in the audience who wants to talk about dealing with issues that resolve around Windows or Office or Access. What do you guys do to troubleshoot when you think it's a Microsoft problem?
Check the version of Office they're on.
Yeah. I look at the calendar. If it's the first week of the month and Microsoft updated on Tuesday, I'm going to look more closely at Microsoft.
I try very hard, and I recommend to others that they don't use the latest version of the rollout.
Yeah.
Not for production. For production should be behind the curve as far as I'm concerned. So
Absolutely, yeah.
I agree with that as well.
So
No,
I'm kind of not in the production business anymore. So although I do participate in the Access Forever group that tries to track new access bugs, and our methodology revolves around, if somebody sees something in one of the forums that smells like a Microsoft bug, they'll bring it to that group of 5 or 6 people and throw it back and forth and try to figure out a pattern or some consistency. So my experience is probably not typical of what most people do because of that.
George, I want to make a note. Can you please put a link to that in the YouTube description?
Yeah. The Access Forever?
Yes.
Yeah, good idea.
There are a few other MVPs that post on their websites, when they notice an access bug, and what's been tried and what's not been tried. So that's great that someone's out there organized enough to track that down.
I've had good luck with finding those bugs online. My first worst one was about a week after rolling out 365, and everything Access shut down, even AutoCAD Electrical that uses an Access database. That was a rollback to fix that one.
Rollbacks in a corporate environment are not easy.
No, well, actually, it wasn't too bad. I was able to distribute it with the tools that update the applications. So once I figured it out, I was able to get it out pretty quick.
I just wanted. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I have all my users turn off automatic updates, and when we have a specific release that's worth getting, like when we got the LAA back in 23.11, I have them explicitly download that version and then have automatic updates turned off. Saves me grief.
I just want to make very clear what I said earlier about not being, ahead of the curve, being behind the curve for production. That doesn't mean that I don't think that a lot of the work to change, to bring out new versions isn't great. And there are a lot of people doing brilliant work to help the Microsoft team to find and fix bugs. I just don't think that's where we should be rolling out software to, that's all.
Yeah, I agree. Unless it's something that you're, like Kent says, where you know that there is a specific fix for a specific issue or a new feature that you want your users to have. I probably don't. I mean, I don't even have myself on the beta channel. There's not enough time left in the day to do that. I need my nap time.
And unfortunately, the methodology for installing specific versions there's 2 or 3 different ways you can go about it, and they aren't all particularly reliable. But at the moment, I think the Office deployment tool is probably the best, but that changes.
Well, with the fact that they keep rolling out new fixes and new updates in those fix packages, I find that they're not really communicating like everything that's included in there. They include like a list of a few major things, but they don't list out every little thing that's included in those, those incremental updates that they're doing now. So it gets a little confusing, in my opinion.
And particularly when they sneak through changes in older versions without you explicitly downloading them. For example,
that's what I'm saying. So when you update like 2019 now, you're getting all the new stuff, and that would change the original behavior of the way 2019 is or that.
Well, for example, I've got 2311 on most of my clients' machines, which has got the large address awareness. But then we had that problem with the combo boxes, George, which we found the problem with that.
Yeah.
And Microsoft resolved that in January of this year. And yet somehow or other, the fix has made its way into 2311, which was released a month before they fixed it.
Yeah.
So there's some shenanigans going on there, which
or was it working in 2311? Something got through after that version that broke it, and then when you got the new update, that
no. It's a problem that's been around for years. The combo box type forward business, when you've got ANSI 92 compatibility turned on.
Yeah.
93. Can I just clarify? My understanding of is that 2019 is sort of closed. It doesn't mean it doesn't get fixes to bugs necessarily, and it certainly doesn't mean it doesn't get anything which is considered to be a security release, but it won't get new features. Yeah. It shouldn't. From what we're told, it won't get new features added to it. I hope that clarifies.
No, I was talking about Office 365 installations.
I heard, or at least I, unless I got it wrong, I thought I heard Jeff comment earlier that something had been released into 2019, which can happen, even retrospectively. Right. It can happen.
Right, yeah.
For security, but I think that also some bug fixes get backported.
When you update 2019, you're getting the current version, like 3204, whatever it is we're on currently. You're getting all those updates in there. You might not get like all the new features, but it definitely comes with newer stuff that wasn't in there before. So it's changed things. I want to say the link table editor.
Are you saying that you get the new link table editor in 2019?
Possibly. Actually, honestly, I can't. Before we say anything for sure, I'm not thinking of anything in particular off the top of my head.
I was just
I know in the past I've seen it come through with a bunch of new stuff on an update that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
I off the
As
top
I
of my
say,
head, but
yeah,
I've seen that a few times, it seems like.
Yeah.
there should be stuff which, as this is what we're told. Okay, I can't put my hand on my heart and say I've checked it and done all this, but we're told that security releases will always, they'll go back for everything that's currently in support. If it's a bug fix, I forget the details. I think bug fixes,
Yeah, you get the bug fixes. Yes.
backported, but new features generally will not.
Or maybe it's updates to existing features.
Indeed, yeah. That
Okay.
now that you might expect.
And that
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah.
It's already in there.
Yeah. Can we defer the rest of this discussion to kind of after the recording? So
I
we
beg
don't
your pardon. Yes,
run
of
out of,
course.
yeah, this is fascinating stuff. And I'm like I say, I often get involved in discussion and forget, but I'm going to put my moderator hat back on. If we can defer specific Microsoft tricks of the trade to the post-recording session, that'd be great. And give Ben a chance to get back on track.
Ben's muted at the moment.
Ben, you're muted.
Okay. So I want to get back on track here. And as part of my troubleshooting, I have tools that I use. I'm not just using plain old Access or Excel to manage my code. As you saw, I showed an example where I was able to zip up an Excel or an Access file, and it automatically named it for me. I've got a slew of things on my send to menu here where I can zip up a file, I can have it prompt me for a version, I can have it encrypt it and split it into multiple files, and that works really well when I have to send a backend to a client or have them send it to me. Basically, you run this. It says what version number. I usually put from Ben. Some kind of message is going to attack on the file, and then I put a password in there. Now it's going to zip up that file and put it in 5 megabyte chunks. And as we see it here, there it is right there. There's one chunk. And then the other ones would be 1, 2, 3, 4 if it had to. And then I could email those chunks in separate emails if they were too big. That's not really a troubleshooting tool, but something I do use daily is Notepad++. So I've got some code that I'm trying to look up. I might just hit new, paste that code into here, and now I have a snippet of what maybe it used to be, and then I would want to compare it to what it is now. The advantage of Notepad++ is I can reboot my computer right now, and all my tabs will come back, and I've got hundreds of tabs open, and I do some house cleaning once in a while and close them down. But there's also
Can I interrupt real quickly, Ben?
Sure.
There was a question today, in fact, on utter access. I won't go into the details, but the resolution was to drop the SQL from a query into Notepad++ and find the control characters. Can you quickly show us how to do like line ends?
Sure. So when you're in Notepad++, if you go to the View menu, you can hit the Show Symbol menu, and you can have it show you, there's your carriage returns. I don't usually use that one, but I was just in here right before the call started, and I'll go back. But sometimes you want to see your tabs and spaces. I have a SQL formatter that I wrote, and it doesn't work when I'm sharing my screen is what I'm learning. But I can hit a hotkey and code that looks like this, which is what you get out of Access. You hit the hotkey and it looks like this, and you can see it tabs, and every individual line of the select has its own line. I can comment outlines if I need to, because I've got the comma at the beginning and not at the end. It does make some of that a little bit easier. You can see your from statement in one block, your where, and if you had ands and ors, it's going to put them on their own rows. And you can find other SQL formatters. There's one called Poor Man's SQL Formatter, and there's a plugin for it for Notepad++. There's also one for SSMS, same SQL formatter, and it has some nice options for how you want it to expand and where you want to put comments at the beginning or at the end. I'll just show you how it'll make this one look a little bit differently. Where's that plugin? Poor Man's there. So it indents the from statement differently than I would normally do it, and I find this a little bit harder to read, especially with AccessSQL, because AccessSQL likes to put a lot of parentheses in your from statement, whereas T-SQL doesn't use that, doesn't require it. But I think George was talking about these characters here, and you can show those by turning on some options here. It's fairly easy. So it's a good way to find out if you've got maybe weird type of spaces, because there's non-printable spaces. Another thing that you find sometimes is those curly quotes. Of course, they don't jump out in here, but yeah, there are some special characters that end up, and it's easier to see them in ASCII. And hopefully the Monaco editor is as good as this, and allows us to zoom in. And one of the questions I asked is, will it allow me to do this? Maybe I want to change all three of those lines at one time. And vertical selection is really cool for cases like that, or maybe even if you wanted to put in a comment. It's good to know a good text editor. There's much improved over just what you get with just regular Notepad. Another thing I do is I export my objects out of Access into text files. I have an add-in that I wrote that just dumps everything to text files, and I do that from time to time. And
there's a save as text method built into Access that allow you to do that as well.
Right. That's why add-in uses that feature. So, I've got a program called ToolTime. So you can see all the different versions here that I've exported over the many years that I've been working on ToolTime. So at any point in time, I could go into this folder, and there's all my modules. There's my macros. I can import these two with the tool that I wrote, but this is all text. So I can search the text in these files there's a program I use called Everything, and that you just saw that here. This program is awesome. It will index your hard drive. You can find anything really, really fast, such as nightly. Why doesn't it find nightly? I just saw the nightly. Yeah, nightly update right there. So if I needed to find, the nightly update query, and it can also look on network drives without even be connected to the network, because it'll index them. But I could take, let's see if I can find two versions of this file. So here's a 3K version of the file, and here's a 2K version. So I know these files are different. Because I have all this history of these files, I can open them in Notepad, and Notepad++ does have a compare tool, but a better one is WinMerge. Main difference, I switched to use WinMerge, is WinMerge, you can turn off case sensitivity. So if I have a variable I, and sometimes Access wants to call it capital I and sometimes little I don't know why it does that, but the normal compare that's in Notepad++ will say there's differences when there aren't. But here I'll throw them into WinMerge, and well, this is a query, so it's highlighting all the differences between the two. You can see there the white line is a line that's no different. I should have probably done a comparison on something bigger, but there's a window on the left side. You can scroll down very useful for finding it's very useful for finding mistakes you might have made by deleting code. If you have to roll back to something that we've all done this before. We make some code enhancement and then realize, because you look at your old code, you're like, why did I do it that way? And then you fix it, and then it breaks a few weeks later because you didn't realize that it was programmed that way intentionally. One of the things I do in my code is I'm always putting in my initials and the date when I make a change somewhere. Sometimes I put it in the header of the function, and sometimes I just put it right on the line where I made the change. Also, I often, as you can see here, I keep commented code in my code. And that might be a no-no if you have a Git repository, and people will say, well, I just can go back to the Git repository to figure out what the code used to be. But that's not always apparent to a developer to go back and look at that old code. I think my comment here is, when I was in Ireland, I happened to notice that the dates were getting formatted differently. And so using the word short date is better than formatting it as the American date style. So that's why it's good, I think, to keep commented out code in your code base. So a lot of stuff has been added to this. So just wanted to show you this tool. It's one of the tools of the trade I use to compare things. Now, I've also got a mechanism where I can take an Access database and dump the schema to a text file. So I have a right-click menu option here, and I'm just going to dump that database schema. It runs a batch file that runs a VB script that loops through all the tables and all the indexes and relationships. And this is a really small database, and I don't even know if it has tables in it. I didn't make this database. And that file is right here. And there's probably nothing in it. Yes. Sorry, that database actually only has code in it. Let's go back just to show you what that can do, though. Because sometimes you make a schema change. What are we looking for? DDL. And okay, so I can go back to 2 different versions. I'll just pick 2 different versions of this script that have run on that particular database. Do a comparison. Of course, paste errors is going to be different. But you can see here, I added a field to this table that I didn't have in that version. And because my file names always have a timestamp date in them, I can figure out, well, this happened in May. And of course, this one was last March. Well, that was both last year, but so it's a combination of tools here that I'm using of being able to see the schema in a text format. Means I don't have to open up Access and go cross-eyed while I'm trying to line up one table design versus another table design. I can see that right on my screen here, what
Ben,
changes there are.
You may want to mention about that deny zero length, though. Not being
So this script is not official Access DDL. I think that's where Chris is going with that. The create table will work, the indexes will work, but I don't like zero length strings. A zero length string means if you have something in a field and you clear it out and save it, what's actually in that record when you're done? Is it a blank or is it a null? And I don't like having to make that choice. So I have a script I run on my tables that for every text field, any varchar field, I set deny zero length on. And so there's a script that looks like good SQL, but this won't run in Access in their DDL interface. But I have another third-party program where I can feed it this script, and it knows how to understand this language, and it will create those properties, because that's a property. It'll create that property for me. Is that what you want me to say, Chris?
Yeah, just in case someone asks for this and wants to try to use it, they just need to know that portion of it, just that one thing, will not function in Access DDL.
Yeah. I've got 12 copies of one application on a network used by 12 different projects. Time to time, a project will ask me for a new field they need for some special report. It doesn't even need to be on the screen. It just needs to be in the back end. And so I might just do that for them. But later, I realize that everybody really should have the same schema. So I'm able to get ahead of some of the debugging and troubleshooting by right-clicking on those files, generating this DDL, and then doing a comparison. If you have Redgate tools for SQL Server, it basically gave me the idea. Well, I had this first, but it does this very similar thing, but it's actually much more powerful because it writes the new code for you. I did try to write a program to do that, and it has limited success. So I talked about a SQL formatter, because if you can format your SQL, some of the stupid things you might put in there, typos and parentheses in the wrong places or something like that, it's going to stand out a little bit more if you can format it. So don't suffer through trying to read queries like this and look for maybe you've got to make changes to a formula multiple times and you can't see how many times it is in there. Whereas this, you can see, hey, I've got a sum here, a sum here, a sum here. So I need maybe 4, 5, 6 times I need to fix whatever that problem is. In VBA, I have a smart indenter that indents my VBA code. There's a couple different products out there that do that. MZ Tools, I believe, also can do that. And it's good for you visually to be able to see your code, but also when you want to try to compare your code to other code you have, if they're in different formats, you're going to get a lot of false positives. So if you have a program you can run that I can indent this whole module. I'm not sure where I'm at here. But I could right click here and just tell it to indent that procedure, and it follows some rules and does that. That indenter is an older version that's free. Right before this call, I went to their website and found out this one's from 2004, believe it or not, and it still works. But there's a new version that's paid if you wanted to use the newest version. If you guys haven't heard of MZ Tools, it's an add-in for VBA. It's well worth the money. One of the biggest bonuses I think is if I've got a function, I can add error handling to it. And when I do that, it's going to be consistent. It's going to find where to put the error handler. And I want to hit OK. You see this routine here now has at the bottom an error handler. My error handler is always named error handler. It's not called PQ publish error handler like Access or maybe some people do.
Yeah.
So
Ben?
Yes.
We have had 2 presentations at different user groups of MZ Tools.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to get a closer look, they can go to the YouTube channel.
Great. I shouldn't dwell on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on. Screen captures. Really great way to, when you're trying to debug a problem in your data and you look up a record and it's record ID, you find a record ID. I don't have a database open right now to say, but if you can get a little screenshot of what you're doing. So I use Snagit, and I could just grab that right there. And now I have it. And an advantage of Snagit is it keeps all my previous screenshots. So if I get interrupted, I can go back to yesterday where I was trying to explain something, and all the screenshot annotations are infinitely editable. I can go back. I've been using Snagit a lot of years. Well, I think 10 years before this, I guess when I got a new computer, it didn't migrate over the library, but I can go back to a screenshot a long time ago, and I can search also. It's kind of got some tagging, some ways to find things. So use a good screenshot program. There might be some free ones out there that will also log and keep your history. But this is worth the money. I think this is $65 or something like that.
Definitely worth the money.
Thank you. But I have another one that's written in auto hotkey. It's amazing. And just what I love about it, let me just find something that looks like really unique. So let's say the name of this field, I need to go add this to a query. I'm going to take a screenshot right there, and that's the entire screenshot now. So I can push that off to the side of the screen. I could make lots of those type of screenshots, you see. It's just a script, a free auto hotkey script that I found that makes those screenshots. And when I'm done with it, I just hit escape. So that's really been helpful for me to troubleshoot problems, is just to grab a little screenshot. What's the file name that we're trying to open, or what's the path? Just to have that at the top of your screen while you're in your VBA and you're trying to edit, and you're like, well, what's the file name again? You don't have to write things down. You don't have to jump back and forth. I did add to the script a zoom capability, so I can, if it works right. It doesn't always work when I'm sharing my screen. Yeah, it doesn't want to work when I'm sharing my screen. I don't know why that is. Some of these screen capture things don't like that. Another thing that I use for tracking down problems is my clipboard history. So I want to be able to go back to that. It could be a line of code. It could be an ID number that I need to search up again. It could be a value. It could be a cell. Let's see here. B14. Now that's on my clipboard, and I can paste that. But as soon as I grab something else, you guys know, now my previous thing is not there anymore. Well, if you can do this right now in Windows. If you hold the Windows key and press the letter V, it'll ask you if you want to turn on clipboard history in Windows. And it's buried in the control panel, but it'll take you right there. You can turn on clipboard history, and then anytime you hit Windows V, it'll bring up a list of previous values that you've used.
Ben, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
When you say Windows some letter that ends in E, could you tell us what that is phonetically?
Victor.
Victor, thank you.
Windows paste. One thing I didn't like about the Windows implementation was when you scroll down to find that old ID value and you click it, it doesn't put it to the top of the list. So if you're going back and forth between two values, you've got to keep scrolling down. So I found a free program called Ditto. You can see all the things I copied and pasted as I was putting together this presentation. And I can get back, and now I've got back in my clipboard that huge SQL query. Or it even does screenshots. The program's called Ditto. It's free. I can go back to this screenshot and I can paste it into email. And I can also go back and search. So I had a YouTube video I sent to somebody the other day, and there's the hyperlink to that video. I don't have to go back to YouTube and look for it again. So to just stay back on track here, let's see the next. So these are a lot of tools that I'm using to help me be organized and to help me troubleshoot issues. A big piece of this here is having things in a ASCII format so that I can do comparisons, and that I guess it's really or save them as backups in ASCII. So if you guys want to grab a screenshot of that or look it in the video, you might want to look up some of these tools. The screen capture is, oops, it doesn't let me, I'm in presentation mode. But the screen capture I use is Snagit, and the other one was an auto hotkey I'll tell George what it is, and he can add it to the description and the video.
Yeah, I will take care of that when I get to the editing this weekend.
I only just found out that Snagit actually has an OCR built into it, which is quite useful.
And the one I have also has OCR built into it too, which is really cool. Watch this. Just gonna grab that, and right down in the corner, it just OCR'd all that. And you can see it messed up a little bit, but it's much better than retyping. So George, is there anything else that I should have covered?
I saw you previewed a live demo a couple of times. Is that in the office?
That's just a slide.
Okay.
Sorry.
No,
I don't have any more.
We're a little over an hour, so technically we can quit anytime you feel like you've reached a kind of a place where you want to wrap up.
One thing we didn't touch on was doing a compact and repair, and also doing a decompile, recompile.
Yes. And my advice on those is make a backup before you do a compact and repair. As soon as you find out that there's a problem that potentially could be backend is corrupt, make a backup first. Or if your front end is corrupt, that's even more panicking to me as a developer. If I lost code that I worked on, but always make a backup, because it might take multiple attempts to resolve the problem. And I know compact and repair, sometimes if it fails, it'll make a backup, or Access will make a backup. But my rule of thumb on backups is you can't have too many. Be responsible for your own backup. Don't trust IT to be making backups for you. I'll go out to the network on occasion and just back up my Access files, even though I know supposedly IT is backing up the server. You don't want to have to rely on IT to say, oh yeah, well that script wasn't running because Joe resigned and his password didn't get reset or whatever.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions directed towards what Ben has covered? We had a couple of side conversations about commenting out code, leaving it in or taking it out. I think Adrian and I have a slight difference of approach, but not that far apart. I usually leave it in until I'm sure that whatever change I made is going to be permanent and not introduce new bugs before I take it out. But I do eventually remove it. Does anybody else have a comment or question or example?
One quick question I had was you said SQL, the poor man's SQL editor. Was it the poor man's T-SQL editor that's on GitHub there?
Yes.
Is that the one we were talking about? Okay.
It is.
Okay. I put a link to that in there. I wasn't clear on what that tool was exactly.
Yeah. And I will pull all of the links out of the chat and put them into the video description when I publish it.
Ben, do you log your changes in the front end? Like any change I make, I have a front end change table.
Yes, I do, and let me show you that. In fact, I export it, but let me go to a program and show you what that looks like. I have a table I put in all my databases, and so my code exporter can find that table and export that also, because then that's on my hard drive and searchable. So I have a table that I happen to name sysrevision. And what I'll do is I'll put the version number of the software, the date, and my initials. Now I've got multiple developers sometimes working on these things. But yeah, I'll try to put a statement in here of what changed, and I try to put a bold, because if I have to scan back, the bold part helps me understand right away, that it's not what I'm looking for. So, and you can see this is 2024. This table goes back 20 years. So, and my comment on having one of these tables is, if you support multiple products or you're not in the product every day, the bug that you're going to have to fix is most likely in the range of the last features you added. Maybe you didn't completely do what the user asked for, or maybe you implemented a new problem while you did it. So I'm always jumping back to here because I can't always remember. I might do a software update twice a year for some of the products I have. So when I hear about the bug, I'll go here like, oh yeah, that's where I was last working. And I'll go find that query. And let's figure out what's going on with this guy here. And this is a pass-through query, so I like to put comments in my pass-through queries as well.
That's very similar to what I do. I log the current highest revision number of a front end when they have an error or any other event I want to log.
Yeah, I also ask the user what version they're on, and so I should make sure that the version number is on the menu screen. And I tend to use the same switchboard, so it's always right here. Now, when I'm ready to publish a new version, let's say I added a button in this software somewhere, I can shift click on this and it asks me if I want to update the revision number. And so it'll automatically bump it up one revision for me. And that feature doesn't work unless you're a developer. So that saved me some time. As you guys probably see, I'm into automating things. I'm into having shortcuts. When I want to type in my initials and today's date, I have a hotkey that puts today's date. Well, no matter what program I'm in, I can hit the hotkey and it'll put today's date. And if I'm renaming a file, I can put the date with another hotkey in file name compatible format, which is, well, you can't tell if you're in. You guys in the UK probably love this today, huh? So there's the month, there's the day. And so your files will sort when you keep using that pattern on your file names.
You think that's the problem, Ben? You think that's the problem? It's yesterday. It's tomorrow already.
Tomorrow is the problem, isn't it?
No, we're already in tomorrow. Well, you're tomorrow.
The first 12 days of every month is a problem, isn't it?
No, I'm talking about something. I know what you're talking about, but not when it's in reverse order. What I'm saying is today for us is the 7th, but for you is still the 6th.
Oh, I see. Yes. So
Kevin Bell had a question in the chat, asked why not use Git?
So why not use Git? I used to use Visual SourceSafe way back, and I liked the way it did it. I didn't understand Git when it came out. It was very command line driven. It's still, I've used it a few times.
It kind of struck me as you're basically doing Git without having a repository and the benefits of that. Like your notes are basically what you would do as a commit. Git repository is fully searchable.
Yeah, do you want to put your production code up on somebody else's Git server? That's a good question, right?
Yeah.
Unless you want to set up your own Git server on your own machines and stuff. But that's typically why I don't use like Git for a tool like that, because I put my code anywhere. And I know you can even block it off to make it private or whatever, but who knows? What if it gets hacked or, anything could happen, right? Or, it hands and numbs somebody else's, some nefarious company who wants to get into everybody's code. So that's why I don't do it.
Yeah, there's.
Well, Ben and I do have, we work for the same company, and we do, there are other developers in our company that do use Git, and we have a Git server. So it would be available to us, but quite frankly, I don't use it either because I don't know enough about it. I've tried to use it a little bit with Visual Studio, but it's still a little outside of my comfort zone.
That sounds to me like a topic for a presentation.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I may have, I think I may have one lined up. Those of you who went to Armenstein's Access Day saw, who was it that, was it Mike Wolf who demoed the visual, or not the visual, but the source code?
Yeah, it was Mike Wolf.
Mike Wolf, yeah. So I'm trying to get a presentation for that scheduled.
I think you need a third-party tool to really make it work, because Access doesn't save everything as a file like other development platforms. So you still have that hurdle of how do I get my objects out as text files before I can shuttle them off to a library.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's part of that larger presentation, which I'm sure will take at least an hour to do. It's clearly not a simple subject. Yeah, you're right. So we're already at almost an hour and a half. So Ben, would you like to kind of wrap up?
I'm fine to wrap up. I don't. I'll answer more questions, I guess.
Okay.
If there's anything else, and then we can wrap up.
What's that hotkey application you're using?
So there's a program called AutoHotkey.
Oh yeah.
And it's a scripting language, and so the script might look. Well, there's comments. So it's it's not real hard to read. If you can read VBA, you can read it, but actually the script to put today's date is so simple in this language. Where's let me find it. Oh, it's not in here. That's why. Yeah. You can make a hotkey, should be near the top of my code up here. If I type B and the @ symbol anywhere, it'll type my email address. And I don't even use that query, but say I just typed B, @ symbol, hit the space key, and it put my name. And in the AutoHotkey language, that's the code. That one line of code in an AutoHotkey file, if you have AutoHotkey running on your computer, it will give you that. I think the date one should be at the top here some, but I don't want to get in the weeds, but that's the program. That's what the language looks like. Oh, here it is right here. Insert today's date at the cursor. If I hit Control semicolon, it'll take the current time, format it that way, and send it. Now, if I hit a different key, it'll put it in the other format. That's the language right there. I could put this much code here in this file, save it as, date hotkey.ahk, and I could double click that, and I would have down here another H icon down here that represents that hotkey. Now, what I've done is I've compiled lots and lots of hotkeys. Some of them are specific to certain programs like Access or SSMS. I just keep adding to my library of hotkeys. Sorry, I like to talk about that. I'll get back to my slide here. Any other questions? Oh, thanks for attending this session.
Appreciate it.
Feel free to like and subscribe.
Yeah. Come back next month. Actually, that sort of leads me to the next step. I see 3 people here tonight who have agreed to do presentations in the coming months. So I appreciate Kevin, Adrian, and Ron, who've all agreed to present at some point in the coming months. I appreciate your help. I don't have slides prepared for your topics, but I will let people know. Kevin's coming back in August. I think we agreed on August. Adrian, September, and Ron, I think October, correct?
Correct.
All right, great.
Hey, George, is there a meeting in July? I don't see that on the users group calendar.
Oh, you're kidding me. No,
Maybe
well, yeah, July, yes.
If I look at July, I just see.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's 4th of July is right on top of that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. I have to confirm that one now. Yeah, now I remember why. I have to confirm that one. I have something tentatively scheduled, but when I saw it was on the 4th of July, I want to confirm that that's actually going to happen. So probably.
Oh, that's the one that. Oh, that's the one on the 4th.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought this was a different group for some reason. I don't know why I was thinking that.
Yeah,
doesn't
we have
really
a
say
proliferation of groups. Do I have John Colby on the fourth? Does it say?
It does say John Colby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so, but I still need to follow up with him to confirm. Yeah, he wants to wrap up his series on classes and talk about a code library, a class library facility. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
I've
Well, like I say,
in implementing that.
yeah. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, like I say, I want to confirm that he's still good for the 4th of July, because I don't want to. We may or may not have a lot of people, so I will talk to him before we get there.
I won't attend on the 4th of July.
Yeah, many
You'll
of
have
us.
other things to do.
Yeah. Oh, Adrian, you know, that's our Day of Independence.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I'll turn the recording off.